So with that Studio 720 entrance song, a local Prince George band who is absolutely phenomenal. They rock pretty hard. That means we're live with Crazy Damn Canadians. Elmer, how are you doing?
I'm staying alive, doing the best I can with what we got to live with.
And you know, Elmer, it is absolutely phenomenal to have you here today on the podcast. And you have quite the history in Prince George, and the community's really been blessed for your artwork and your carvings throughout the years. So before we get to all the amazing sculptures and wood carvings you've done at Cottonwood Island, let's talk a little bit about your history. Where did you grow up, and what was your childhood like?
Growing up in Prince George, like anybody back in the era, it's been great. It's a great community to be born and raised in. I was born here in 54. My dad came here in 1934. Started a business, was Gundy's News at the time, and he had that for a number of years. A lot of the old-timers recall it. And from that, he raised a family of myself, being the youngest, my older brother, and then older sister, a family of 5. And we've been here ever since, so yeah. And the community's been really great for supporting me as an artist. I have, from everybody, from the support at the park to some of my artwork, I've been very blessed by the local community.
And the community being the recipient of your amazing artwork has been blessed as well. At what age did you realize that you had a gift, that you were able to provide, that your mind worked differently, that you were able to provide artwork, or create artwork, I should say, separate from what the normal human being's capable of?
Oh boy, what age? Probably the first time I got caught drawing on the living room wall with my crayons, so I was pretty young. After getting a licking from that, I thought I had something I could work with, and always played with art, always played with it, but never really chased it or pursued it as much as I did in the last, say, 30 years. Then I started doing sculpture. Like, I did a lot of drawings and sketchings, paintings, but none of that really got me going until I did the 3D thing, and then realized that's where I want to be, and I really pursued that.
Yes, you did. And you are famous for your wood carvings as well as your stone sculptures. Did this start with regular drawings then? Were you drawing on papers and the walls, and that's where you realized that you could create art out of nothing, essentially?
Yeah, well, it's been something that's been in my blood since the first time I drew on Mom's walls, but I knew I was always interested in art. Other things didn't intrigue me as much, but yeah, I pursued it and realized it when people started to buy my stuff or want to buy it, that I was doing something good. Because an artist, you're never happy with what you do. You always see fault in it. You always try to redo it or do the next one better. So yeah, and then when people started coming up, wanting it and wanted to pay money for it, I was grateful to be able to share it with somebody, as well as a little bit of income coming from it.
It's so interesting how an artist's mind works in terms of you create something absolutely spectacular where somebody will look at that and they'll just be in awe of its beauty. Whereas an artist, when you're looking at that, you might be pointing out flaws or ways that you could have done things differently. Yeah. It really is fascinating. So we're going to get into the Cottonwood Island sculptures and other work you've done, but I just want to kind of go back from the beginning one more time. You grew up with your family in Prince George, and you mentioned that you had a sibling, a sister?
Yes, my sister was the oldest of the 3 of us, and she died in the Bahamas scuba diving, trying to set the world's record on air tanks.
And what year was this?
That was in 1972. Her and I were down there for the summer at a little diving resort. It was on the Andros Islands in the Bahamas, and they were practicing at the time to break the record. I was packing air tanks down to them for decompression coming up, because the dives they were doing, they were going down 340 feet quite often.
And you must have been quite young at the time.
I was 17 at the time, and I was packing tanks down for the decompression forms. They're coming up because they'd wear a double pack and then run out of that before they could surface. So I would pack some more tanks down, and deepest I had gone at the time was 240 feet. But December 11th, they attempted their dive at 480 feet, and problems happened, and we never saw him again. But just this year, December, I got a call from a researcher out of LA. They were putting together a book or a movie. I'm not sure which it's going to be at this point. He's still gathering all the information. But he's researching one of the safety divers, what was on the two lines that dropped down on either side when Ann and Archie were on the center line setting the record. And the safety divers, one of them was, can't remember his name at the moment. He used to write a lot of detailed diving logs of what had gone on. And he had put together all this log up to the day that they dove and then afterwards. And anyways, this researcher shared that with me. It blew me away because there's all kinds of information in there that we had never heard, our families. So, and pictures that he shared. So he was asking me at the time if I could contribute any more information to this book they're putting together, or movie, whichever it is, which I did provide him a bunch. So waiting to see that come out. So that kind of brought back a lot of emotions and a lot of feelings that had been stored away for the last 50 years. So it was part of my childhood growing up, and I had come back that September for school. So.
Wow, so looking back in 1972, right, where that is many decades ago, and for this past December, an individual from Los Angeles, California, to reach out to you who had supplementary information about that devastating day that happened in your family, you know, it's got to bring back a lot of memories for you for that day since you were there. But also, was there a sense of gratitude just knowing that there was, it's not forgotten?
Definitely. Yeah. What's happened has happened. There's no changing that in life as it goes by. But it was great to hear all this additional information that I didn't know about. Yeah, it was a good feeling to have that. Yeah, and it brought back lots of memories again, but memories can be good.
Yeah, that's for sure. So moving forward to high school, what high school did you go to in Prince George, and what was your experience like growing up as a teen in PG?
PGSS, pretty wild and crazy. Yeah, there was a lot of parties going on back then, a lot of young kids. A lot of them died because of car accidents and drinking and driving and being crazy. Prior to that was Dutchess Park I went to, and then prior to that, of course, was KGV. Town was quite a bit smaller at the time, but it was a great area to grow up in. Everybody knew everybody. And as you got out of school, your friends start to slip away, and as we get older, you have a lot fewer. So it's very important to hang on to them when you have them.
Yeah, because that would have been the late 1960s, early 1970s, if my math is correct, when you were in high school. And, you know, you hear stories from people that have grown up in Prince George and maybe created businesses or lives here. And they talk about the 1960s as the wild, wild west in Prince George, where it really was a boom town and people were coming and going, by the hundreds. But Prince George has always had some sort of invincible magnetic pull where once people arrive here and get accustomed to the lifestyle, it's even if they try to move away again, or if they have plans just to come here for a year, make some money and leave, this magnetic pull kind of just keeps them here or keeps bringing them back.
Well, it has, yes. I've met a lot of people that, just the way you've described it, that have come back, and others from nice towns. Like there's one lady, she just bought one of my pieces there, and she was from White Rock. And I asked her, why would you want to move from White Rock to Prince George? She says, so I could afford to live. We got a beautiful home now. We love living here. We can do things. They weren't just working 2 jobs just to pay their rent or to pay for their house, or down in White Rock where it's so expensive. Up here, people can live and enjoy life. And yes, I'm glad I'm here, especially now with COVID going on. More so.
Absolutely. I mean, we always talk about like what kind of commodities that Prince George offers that are very sought after by other individuals who don't live here. And number one commodity has to be space. Yeah. The fact that you could, Cottonwood Island, where you're very prolific. You can go to Cottonwood Island on an afternoon at 3 p.m. and have the place to yourself. And not many places in larger metropolitan areas are you able to go to one of the community's most popular parks and have it to yourself. Usually you're fighting with hundreds of people for space. So it's really, really nice to see. So after high school, was that when you started to take your gift of being an artist seriously and notice that, hey, I can make a living off this, you know, like I can sell and do some commission work and actually do this full time?
Probably about 5 years after high school, when I got out from there. After high school, basically when I was 19 years old, I started at the city, which was a great job to have at the time, and stayed with them for 35 years. So it was great for me to be home, raise my family, coming home every day, not having to work out of town. Yeah, it was a great employer to have. We had some great administration people and mayors and everybody there. And city managers, George Paul's one of them, really good people. So very grateful that I was able to have that job early in life. So with it, I was able to retire at 55 with a full pension, and then I could really push my artwork and get going with it. But for about the last 30 years, so 20 years into my work at the city is when I started doing my three-dimensional art. And I got started by that from a good friend in town here. You may have heard of him, John Rogers. He's quite a chainsaw carver. He saw a lot of the bark carvings I used to do, and he says, you should come down to Campbell River one time and carve with us. I didn't have a chainsaw at the time, so I had just recently sold a couple of bark carvings, so I went out and bought a little electric Husqvarna, sent some pictures down to the Campbell River Association, would bring in the carvers, showed them basically what my work was, and they said, sure, come down. So I showed up there, and I've come out with this little electric chainsaw, and there's 35 professional and amateur carvers there, all got high-performance gas saws all lined up, and these massive cedar logs we had to carve. And I'm standing there with my Husqvarna asking for an extension cord so I could plug it in. And everybody was having a good laugh over that. And that year I came in second in my category. So I got to be known down in that area. So we competed there for 5 years, as well as we'd go up into Chetwynd and competed there for 8 years. And my partner was my wife, and still is. And she was my partner in the chainsaw carving competitions, and my critic with everything I do, and my best friend.
Well, that's a great combination.
Yeah.
And see, this is why I love the podcast format, because it's such a great opportunity for me as a host to learn more about you, but also our listeners and watchers, because I didn't know that your wife is an artist too, and your number one critiquer.
Yeah. I don't know if she'd call herself an artist. That she would do a lot of the sanding and that sort of thing, and stand back and tell me I got this, what's wrong, or so. But I guess we better call her an artist, so she keeps cooking me supper.
Yeah, and you mentioned Chetwynd, because I am always so enthralled to drive through Chetwynd. We were just actually up in Tumbler Ridge last summer, checking out some waterfall hikes, and to anyone listening, like, Tumbler Ridge is the waterfall capital of the world. You go there and there's just one waterfall after a next after a next. It's beautiful. Only 4 hours from Prince George. On the way driving north, you go through Chetwynd and you just see all these magnificent wooden chainsaw carvings. And there's, and maybe you could elaborate on this, but there's annual competitions, and how did all of this work, all of this artistic work that's being showcased in Chetwynd come to be? Do you know the history there?
A little bit. When we first started, I think there was only 5 of us were showing up to Chetwynd to compete. And they started getting a lot of sponsorship from a lot of the big industry around that area, gas and oil and such. And they were able to bring in more and more carvers from around the world. So by the time I left, they had limited it to just 12 carvers, and it was by invitation only. And they would select who they wanted. So they went from a few locals in BC and that area to handpicking some of the world's best carvers. And we were competing with people from England, Germany, States, China, Japan, all over the world were competing there. It was quite a competition. And it was overwhelming to be invited to be able to compete with these others that were there.
And what an experience for you, as well as any other domestic artist, to see these world-renowned artists from around the world, from multiple countries, all congregate to one place to show off their talents.
Yeah.
And, then just north of Prince George in Chetwynd as well. So did you compete for multiple years in Chetwynd then?
For 8 years we competed there. But so as they kept getting heavier and heavier, and the competition was younger and younger, so yeah.
Nice. And I know that like you're very famous for all of your wood carvings as well, but you also enjoy working with stone. And there's an actual quote, it might be from the Prince George Citizen newspaper, where you were doing an interview for an article, and you mentioned that when you're working with stone, you have to have so much more precision. You're precise in every single cut, because with wood, you might be able to make minor mistakes and make up for it, but with stone, it's different. You have to be bringing your A game. Can you talk about that a little?
Well, I got started with it after wood was the first medium I started from, and then I started working in clay a year after I retired. I went to New York and studied under a sculptor named Philip Ferrero. He's quite famous. Spent a week with him. And with clay, you can add and take away with what you're doing, which is great when I'm doing facial work. You'll notice I do a lot of faces when I do my sculpting. So combining those two mediums, I added them now to doing stone. So both of them helped me be able to work in stone. And you're absolutely right. When you're cutting into stone, you don't have a lot of room to make mistakes. So you've got to make sure everything's right. So you do a lot of thinking, and you learn to have patience. You rush it, you're going to have problems. So that it's a great medium. It's a medium that's going to last forever. It'll outlast me and my kids. So when you do a piece of stone and you do sell it to somebody, they've got it forever, and something they can put in their will to pass along to somebody else. So it's a great thing to have, be remembered by myself, like by the art that I produce. I was always told one time, you die 3 ways. The first way is when your heart stops. Second way is when your body decomposes. And the third way, when your name is spoken for the very last time. And I thought that was very cool. So if my art keeps surviving out there and my name keeps getting mentioned, I should last a while.
What a powerful quote. I'm rehearsing that quote that you just said in my mind, and it's so true, because to me, what is synonymous with artwork is longevity. And whether it's wood carvings or stone, I look at when I go through Cottonwood Island with my daughter, and she'll be on her bike, and we'll stop by every single wood carving we see. Your name always comes up. Oh, this is an Elmer carving. and then I get to explain to my daughter who you are. You're a local artist who is really showing this park some real character by dedicating so many substantial amount of hours towards these carvings. And the fact that you can influence so many people in a positive way, where they get to walk by a carving, stop, take a picture with it, really admire it. I mean, that is powerful stuff, Elmer. It's something you should be proud of.
Oh, I am. I'm very grateful I was the one to have a chance to do that. Yes, it's been great. And to go in there and do it, the people that would stop and talk to me as I'm carving into the trees was really overwhelming. And all the thank yous I would get for it. And it was not just me, it was done throughout the city and the regional district, and myself that went in and did. I didn't just sneak in one night and start whittling away on the trees, so we had to have permission. And yeah, but it's been great. It's been so much positive feedback from it. It's like having my own gallery in Prince George and not having to pay rent.
Yeah, and nature is literally your canvas.
It is, yeah.
What was the first year when you did your first carving? Do you remember?
72 was the first year. The park was built in 1983. Now back to where my working at the city, I was put in the charge of looking after and developing that park for the first 2 years of it. And that was in 83. We've slashed the trails through, cleaned it up. There was a lot of hobo camps there, and turned it into a functioning park at the time. Then Colin Kinsley, in 1972, he was buying some of my carvings to take to give away as gifts when they would go on business trips or whatever. And I said to him, why don't you allow me to go down to Cottonwood Island Park and carve into the trees? Because at that time I'd heard of an individual up in, I think it was Terrace, where he had carved in one of their parks, Paddle Wheel Park. No, Ferry Island, I think it's called.
Okay.
Anyways, he had done some carvings in the trees, same trees as what we have here. So he agreed. So I got to go in there and spent a week in there on the first time, 1972, and carved 8 trees up. And then sorry, did I say 1970? I should have said 2005. That was 2005. I carved the first set of trees. There was 8. Then 2007, we had the floods, and 2 of the trees got washed away. So then in 2008, they had me go back in and do another 6 trees. And then again in 2009, I think it was, I came back and did another set. So altogether there was 20 carvings in there. But every time I did it, the feedback was just so strong. And I'd be in stores or Costco and people come up, "Are you the guy that," yep, that was me. It was just so great to hear the positive feedback from it.
That's another thing about Prince George. With such a small, tight-knit community, it must be really hard for you to go, say, to the grocery store or Costco without at least one person coming up to you being like, "Are you that guy?"
Yeah. Well, sometimes the face isn't always that recognizable. Sometimes I'll be walking through the park. I go down there quite often, and people will stop me to tell me there's carvings in the trees, and they'll point them out to me, and I'm very gracious and thank them for showing me these, because I would not have seen them. Yeah. But it's just nice to watch their feedback without letting them know.
Yeah. Well, I think you and I can both agree that as a community, public artwork is vitally critical. Mm-hmm. And just the fact that it has the potential to turn around somebody's day. And I look at Cottonwood Island as a perfect example where you can go there, and there really is a surreal, magical feeling to that park. There really is. The combination of the carvings and these massive trees right next to the confluence of the Fraser and the Chaco rivers, with birds that are landing on people's hands and feeding them, and the wooden old Cameron Street Bridge replica. It's just so many of these factors, these variables come together to create just this perfect community park. And you've played a substantial role in that with all of your carvings. I have to ask the question, because there has been some vandalism there in the past. How does that affect you as a human and an artist when that happens?
Well, it's never a good feeling, but for all the years that the carvings have been there, there's only been one time they've been vandalized, and that was the dragon that we had done. And to me, it was just a kid doing something stupid at the time. I'm sure now he probably doesn't think it was such a great idea. And when I was a kid, I did a lot of stupid things. You regret, you wish you hadn't, but it's part of growing up, part of being life. So luckily the pieces were laying on the ground. Some lady happened to find them. She stopped by and phoned me up and told me about it, and I went and picked up the pieces and was able to put it back together. So the trees eventually take the carvings back. As the early ones, you'll see they're fading into the trees, and the squirrels have been chewing on them, and the birds, which is part of nature, part of life. So for only having one got actually vandalized by a human being, I'm not that upset about it.
Well, you have a great attitude, right? Yeah. And the fact that you're showing compassion to an individual who obviously made a mistake with the vandalism, I mean, that shows a lot there. Do you have any future carvings planned for Cottonwood Island? And if yes, what would those look like?
Nothing in the works right now. And again, it's a joint thing. I just don't go in. It's something the city and regional district get together with it before we go in there and do something like that. Every time I walk, I always look at the trees and look for ones that have potential to show another carving. I'm always working in the arts. Life is like a roll of toilet paper. Closer it is to the end, the faster it goes. So I'm trying to get as much carving in as I can and sculpting. So I always got projects on the go at home, and with stone and clay, and I'm painting these 3-dimensional masks that I've built. And then I supply a lot of galleries down in Whistler. There's 3 galleries, so I'd have my stone carvings down there, and there's galleries up here in Prince George. And so it's a full-time job now, working the art and marketing yourself. It's the other 50% of your full-time job.
Yeah, that's very demanding on your schedule because as an artist, you always want to be working and
Yeah,
creating, right? But then there's the other side where you have to be taking care of integrated marketing campaigns and working with different museums or venues that might want to showcase your work throughout the province
right.
and beyond. One thing that I really respect about your artwork, Elmer, is that when you look at Prince George and you think about iconic
Mhm.
locations or figures, you think Mr. PG, you think the Grand Trunk Bridge. I would even put the winery on that list now, just even though they opened 6 years ago, they've had such a presence. But also your carvings in Cottonwood Island. If I were to have visitors coming into Prince George from another city or some relatives from Scotland, one of the top things that I'd want to do is bring them down to Cottonwood Island and show off these beautiful carvings, and and that just goes to prove that we use the word longevity already, where it's not like you have a carving in a tree and there's a certain timestamp on it where
Mhm.
it's going to be relevant. I mean, it really is indefinite, and that goes for all of your work. So you mentioned clay. Can you talk a little bit about when you first started getting into working with clay and what kind of sculptures you or what kind of clay work you like to do in that category?
With the clay, it was 2009 when I first got started in it through the course I took in New York with Philip Thoreau. Uh, and he specialized in the human form. And that was something I was really struggling with, is to do the human face. It's one of the most difficult things to sculpt, is the human's face. We all have the same anatomical build with their two eyes, the nose, the mouth, the ears, but it's the infinite different subtle distances or fat deposit or muscles or the skin what makes us all unique. And that was something he was teaching us. So when I came back from that, I loaded up on lots of the clay materials and tools, and it was a great medium to be able to work on in the wintertime, because with stone and wood, a lot of that's outside work, which I do in the spring, summer, and fall. But in the wintertime, allows me to go inside and work in the clay medium, where I can work at building the face and getting more detail to it and teaching myself over and over. So it's been a great medium to practice upon, and you can really do so much with it. And then the local Potters Guild here, Studio 2880, they've been extremely helpful. They would fire all my pieces for me, and so I don't have my own kiln, but it's quite an art in itself just to fire the clay after it's dried enough. And I've done a lot of these, what I call my standing sculptures, and there are a few of them around town, different locations. Crossroads Brewery have 3 of them down there right now, standing at the bar because of the limitations we have of being able to go into restaurants. They had a vacant space, and they were kind enough to put these 3 characters standing behind. They've got glasses of wine. One's holding a mug of beer. They're pretty unique, and they really fit the place. Some of them are done of the local people that used to live here. One was I did of Scotty. People back in the 60s, 70s might have remembered him. He was a camp cook at one of the mills up here, and he would get his paycheck. He'd come into town, he'd blow it at the bars, but everybody knew him because he's such a kind old man. And he'd get drinking, he'd start singing these Scottish jigs all the time. And he would stay here till his check was gone. And then he'd head out to the camp, and they'd bring him back every time because he was such a damn good cook. But when I had finished that sculpture, I'd posted it on my Facebook page, and I had all kinds of people referring to him. They remembered him back at the time. These ladies at the post office were telling me he used to come into the post office and sing for him. And when he'd get thrown in jail around Christmas, they had him do the cooking for all the other people who had to spend Christmas in the jail. So he was quite a character. So it was fun doing in clay some of the old people that used to live here. And right now he's having a beer down at the Crossroads Brewery.
Wow, what a spectacular tribute to a Prince George character who probably a lot of people might not know about, and the fact that through your art you're able in a way to manifest the memory of this enigma. It's very cool.
Like I say, last time your name is spoken as when you finally die.
Goes back to that quote, right? I'm very interested how your mind works, Elmer, in terms of
Me too.
when I see one of your sculptures, I visualize like reverse engineering it to say it's a piece of driftwood or just a cottonwood tree at the park. Are you able to visualize what the final product of your artwork looks like ahead of time when you just see a, say, raw material or raw product? Or when you visualize something and you start as an artist sculpturing and working on the project, does it take a life of its own and shift into something completely different? How does that work?
Yes to everything you said. When you start, it's like you'll have a picture in your mind what you want, but when you're sculpting either wood, stone, or even clay, you aren't in total control. Like the stone has its say what's going to happen. Wood will as well, with the grains, the dots. So it's like you're looking at somebody way far away. You can barely make them out. And as you're starting to carve and more you're working it, it's like they're getting closer. And as they're getting closer, you're starting to see more detail in the piece. It's starting to come together until it gets close enough that you can see it wink back at you. I like for people to see the energy and the emotions I do put into my pieces and try get that energy and emotion in there, that they can feel that when they're looking at them. It's a challenge, but it's not always exactly what you see. You have an idea, but it will never come out 100% to what you've put down into your thoughts, but you get as close as you can, and sometimes the stone or the wood has a better idea than what you do on what you're going to do. And go, hey, I like that idea. I'll go that direction. Maybe his smile will look this way, or his expression will be a little different. But yeah, so.
Do you have any favorite carvings of all time? Probably a loaded question, but can you think of anything that comes top to mind that would be on the, say, top 3 of your favorite sculptures or carvings of all time?
Yeah, I've got quite a few in the different mediums that I really like, and some were pretty sad to let go, but I knew they were going to good homes. It's like having an orphanage, letting your pieces go off. But yes, lots are jumping through my mind right now that I really liked. You kind of wished you held on to, but.
And that has to be really tough as an artist, especially like some of these must take hundreds of hours, right? And, easily hundreds and hundreds of hours. And when it gets to the point where you actually have to let go of a piece that might be like a commission piece, what's going through your head at that time when something that you just bonded with for hundreds of hours is all of a sudden no longer in your vicinity anymore? You want to make sure it ends up in a good home or venue or place, right?
It's a piece of you what's going. Like every piece I do, there's a piece of me in it. And I feel that when you let it go. It's part of being an artist. I'm sure a painter feels the same way about it, their work. Any sculpture or three-dimensional artist or two-dimensional artist, or even musicians, they put their heart and soul into their work. So it's part of the business. It's part of what you're doing when you're doing art. Otherwise, I'd have to have a much bigger home for all my art to sit in. Yeah,
and I remember you actually had a beautiful wooden horse sculpture that you carved, and it was for sale at the Northern Hardware on 3rd Avenue a few years ago.
Yes.
And just a beautiful piece, and John Brink ended up buying it.
Yeah.
And he has it in a main living room at a project office, and we have meetings there with different clients, and it's always the number one talking point. It always is. As soon as somebody comes in to that living room and they look in the corner and they see this big, beautiful horse carving, before you can even start a meeting, you're talking about that carving for 10 minutes. You really, really are.
And the name isn't dying, is it?
And I look at something like that, and I always just think that must have just taken so much passion and energy and time to be able to create such a gorgeous final product. And that's just one out of many, many, many sculptures that you've done. Another article that I was reading last night when I was just preparing for this interview was about this beautiful bear that you did of stone. And it had quite the backstory in terms of transport. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Well, I believe so. That one took me close to a year to do. That was a commission piece from one of the local families in town here. And the stone came from Italy, and it was shipped over to Vancouver. And that's where I purchased it, out of Vancouver. There's two different stone suppliers down there. When I'm doing big stone pieces, I will contact them and sometimes go down and hand pick the piece. But from there, it was shipped up to Prince George here, and it took me close to a year to finally complete it. And it's between it and the base, two big jade blocks that he stands on. It was just over 2,000 pounds. And he was done with the presence to greet people coming into their home, with being powerful but not scary. And we achieved that, and the family is very happy with the final result. So,
absolutely. And I just want to touch on when you go down to Vancouver and you said you actually picked out the stone. What does that process look like? Do you just you look at a variety of different stonework and you kind of just know what you want to work with?
Well, some of it too is the people, what they want. So you try to work that into it, and you get it as close as you can, because you're picking rocks from the earth here. You can't get it exactly what might be in their mind, but you're looking for color, you're looking for the different hardnesses, all different stones, from soapstones, extremely soft, easy to work with. I've had wood what's harder than soapstone, but then you can go up to marble, or jade is the hardest I've ever carved.
Jade?
Jade.
Yeah. Why is that?
Just the density of it. It's a very, very brittle, hard stone.
So easy to make mistakes in?
You can make a mistake in just about anything, including life. But yeah, it's like anything. You can make a mistake in it. And I purchased a fairly large piece, and I just finished it. It's sitting in a gallery down in Whistler. But so to your question, I will go down and hand pick a stone. A lot of times you're taking a hammer with you and you're tapping on the stone. You're listening to it, because the stone will have fractures in it. Sometimes you can hear them. So you're trying to feel that sort of thing out. With the jade, though, it's an extremely hard stone to work in. And I just finished a piece. It was started off at 750 pounds, and I believe my finished weight was around 350. And it's this bear, and he's kind of a whimsical bear sitting there with a smiling face and playing with his toes, but he's sitting in a gallery down in Whistler right now, greeting the people. When they get there after this COVID thing is all over with, hopefully he'll find a home.
Oh, outstanding. Who are some of your biggest influences in your life, whether it's other artists or family or friends? Who are some of these influencers that have played a large role in your life to the artist and human that you are today?
Who? Well, as far as through the arts, I think it would be a lot of it. The individual I went and studied under from in New York, Philip Farrell, he was an incredible inspiration. There's a lot of books I'll read about artists. They all jump out at me, and everybody's unique in their own way. So as far as just one person, I can't say there is. There's numerous ones, from the masters, the old-time masters, all the way up to modern-day artists.
And with that said, you must have a lot of people reach out to you. Maybe it's aspiring artists who are just trying to take their first crack at maybe sculpting some stonework, or they want to do a wood carving for the first time. Mm-hmm. What is it like for you to be an influencer and to be able to inspire these young artists who are up and coming?
Well, I find it very rewarding. It's, especially the young people, working with them. Like, I wish I had that sort of thing when I was first getting started, was where I could have had people to bounce questions off of. And a lot of my teaching was just through books and self-taught, and a few courses or week-long courses I would take elsewhere. But to help the young ones, that's very rewarding. Studio 2880, the art council there, they just had us do, myself and 6 other artists. We did a podcast with a bunch of, or a Zoomcast, I guess it's called, and with a bunch of the young students, and they all connected. So we had a mix of artists, sculptors and painters and photographers and numerous different ones. And we worked with the kids, and it was really a lot of fun. They were phoning up and asking online there the different questions, and yeah, it was very rewarding for us. And even had some since still contacting me. I give them my email, and they call me up when they have problems or mistakes, and I work with them. And yeah.
Well, that's the great thing about technology as well, and social media. There's always the yin and the yang, but I'm a firm believer that social media can be a place where individuals can escape from the hardships of life. I mean, life is a challenge. You know, we have our struggles and our hardships, and so I firmly believe that social media should be a place where people can go to escape from that and to leave feeling better than when they first arrived. That isn't always the case, but
Right.
there are a lot of great things that happen on social media. And I have noticed that you've been prevalent on social media where you have these nice videos that show you as an artist doing your thing, like working with a different piece. And so how has social media changed, I guess, the way people see your art? Because once you post out, say it's a video of if you're doing a chainsaw carving or something, you must have a lot of people from all over the world that are seeing this and that might reach out and might want to collaborate or have questions. What's the impact of social media being like for you as an artist?
Well, it's huge. I think when I first started, we didn't have social media. I was going down to the library, and I got my first book out of there, How to Carve Bark, and that was by Joyce Buchanan, I believe. And it was a simple book on how to do bark carvings, and that's what I started with when I started my first bark. Since then, social media has come in and taken over, and it's huge for reference. Like, rather going to the library, you can sit and within minutes have all kinds of reference material. Faces, like I'm always researching, looking for a face or expressions, and it's huge that way. Being able to show your art is huge compared to what it used to be years ago. And I do most of mine through Facebook, Elmer Gunderson Artist, and Instagram is the other one I do. I used to have a web page. I didn't find it attracted a lot of people, so I pretty much dropped that and just use the two social medias of Instagram, Facebook. And they've been huge. I can post a new piece, and you can see how many people are following by the likes and comments you get. And it's like needing a pat on the back. You throw a picture on of something you're working on, and here come the pats. So yeah, it's great.
And what is your Instagram handle, your name?
Just Elmer Gunderson.
Yeah. And I follow you on Instagram, and it's always, we live in a world where people scroll fast. They log onto a social channel and they're just scrolling at a rapid speed, and I'm no different. But when I see one of your posts, I immediately stop, because it is literally seeing an artist in their prime do their work. And I have to say, like, the video work is really captivating. And you probably don't boost any ads or do any sponsored campaigns. That's all organic traffic coming your way, and the engagement is huge.
Yeah, it has been. It's been building and building over time. So
yeah. And I have a question about ice sculpting, because it's always really fascinated me. Have you had any experience or work in that regard?
Oh, one winter we did at the art gallery here. John Rogers and I went down, and we were doing a little bit of ice sculpting. That was the first and only attempt I had. I'm a warm-bodied person. Yeah.
So one and done with the ice sculptures. And you look at ice sculpting, and it does not look like easy work, right?
Yeah.
And you must have like a finite amount of time that you can actually work with that ice.
Well, if you're in a hot area, yes. But if you're up north, or like the temperature here, you can take all the time you want right now till things warm up. I carved with one of the individuals. He's big in the ice sculpting, chainsaw carving. He is out of Oregon. Chris, can't remember his last name, unfortunately, but he did a lot of work, and he would go up to Anchorage, Alaska, and different places where they have huge ice sculpting competitions, and it's a total different art form, because they actually glue ice pieces on with a bit of heat and water, and it freezes instantly. They can take a square block and make it into a massive piece by cutting and adding pieces. It's a total different art form, but yeah, I have a lot of respect for those artists, plus it's damn cold.
What a skill set. Just talking to you, it really is incredible what human beings are capable of. And I'm a firm believer that every human on this planet has a skill or a skill set that is unique. And that's the cool thing about human beings, is that we're all so different and malleable, and we bring different things to the table. Like what you're able to accomplish, it must be really satisfying in a way, knowing that most human beings on this planet can't do that. What's it been like as an artist, just knowing that you have this skill that's highly sought after and that not many people can do?
Well, that's the thing. I disagree. I think a lot of people can. They just don't push themselves hard enough to do it. Like the first carvings that I had done were done in cottonwood bark. And one of the very first ones, which I had given to my father-in-law. And I hadn't seen it for years and years. And we were down visiting him one time, and I was looking at the side of his wall, and he's got this piece of bark hanging there, and I'm trying to figure, what is it? Because I couldn't even see a face in it. And why do you have a hanging on your wall? And I realized it was one of my very first bark carvings. So you can barely make out there's two eyes, a nose, and a mouth on it. It was my first attempts. But if you look at where I'm at now, if you just keep pushing yourself and pushing, and eventually it comes around. And I think that's true for so many people, but they just are scared to make that step or make a mistake. They don't want to make the mistakes, but I make thousands of them to be able to get to where I'm at now. So I think a lot more people do have the talent. It's just a matter of finding it and digging for it.
And that's such valid advice, where if I were to look at the younger generation, or really any generation, is that too often we look at things like failure or mistakes as really, really negative things.
Right.
But really, I mean, mistakes and failure are learning experiences, and you have to go through failures and mistakes to actually achieve success. And it doesn't matter what profession you're looking at. If you're an artist like yourself, or if you're an entrepreneur, or if you're a lawyer, or if you're an accountant. I mean, the best accountant in Canada probably once really sucked at accounting when they first started out. But if they let the fear of failure, or if he or she thought, I'm going to probably make mistakes, so I don't want to do it, then you're never going to evolve to anything. So I always say embrace failure, embrace mistakes, and use that as a stepping stone to really get where you want to go.
Failure and mistakes are the best teacher there is out there. She's harsh, but she's very good. Yeah, don't be afraid of it. You're going to make them.
I absolutely love that quote. So what does the future hold for you, Elmer? If you were to look at the next 5-10 years of your life, what are some things that you're looking to achieve, or some things that are on your radar?
Going out for dinner with my friends again. I miss that. Get over this COVID thing. Oh, I think just to keep enjoying the life, living the dream. Keep doing my art. It's so rewarding when you can do a piece you're happy with. It's so rewarding when you can do a piece and you found somebody had bought it, or because they like it so much they want it in their own home. Those are great feelings to have. What else is there in life for me right now? I think that's it. Like I say, I'm living the dream.
Well, you're very humble for a talented artist, and we were just talking before the podcast started, just with the fact that we're sitting here in February of 2021, and we're a year into this global pandemic that has really shifted the way we live our lives, right? But we also compared it to, say, like World War II, or back in the day, where that was a struggle that was so much greater in a lot of ways, and there's conscription, and people are being sent off to countries not knowing when they're going to return home. But here we are a year into this, and people are already losing their minds in a way, right? So I'm hoping that some of the quotes that you've presented in this podcast can really inspire people to let them know that, life, there are so many great things in life to enjoy.
I was watching BCTV News at the beginning of all this COVID thing, and they were interviewing this lady. She was sitting on the beach somewhere. She was quite elderly, I'd guess maybe 80 years old or so. And they asked her what she thought about it, and she said, "We went through World War II. We learned to adapt, and we coped. This is going to be no different." And the way she said it, so calm, so relaxed, I thought, what great words, coming from her. And she just sat there enjoying the sun and the beach and watching the people. And I thought, boy, if she's gone through World War II and has that attitude about dealing with this, I can get through this too.
Amazing inspiration there. And the fact that
is.
as humans, we are adaptable, right? And
Mm-hmm.
if you are out and about in the community, it in a lot of ways it is just, life as normal, except for we're all keeping our space and wearing masks and some different protocols that are in place that we're desensitized to now that just seem normal, right? But in your in your industry or line of work, it has to be very challenging to see venues like museums that are not open to the public, because a lot of your work and other artists from throughout British Columbia and Canada and the world, that's their pride and joy within those four walls of these museums. And for an artist to realize that their work that they've put in so many hours and blood, sweat, and tears in might not be what it was before, where lots of people were seeing it every single day and it was influencing others and uplifting others, that has to be a big struggle for artists.
Oh, it is. Yeah, I'm sure it's hard on all of us that are in that industry. But what can you do? We got to get through it. So
Yeah.
I'm wearing the mask.
I want to reference one quote of yours, and it was from a news article that came out about 2019. And when you Google your name, there's a lot of news articles because people are always,
it's all good.
It's all good.
It's all
People are showcasing your work, especially at Cottonwood Island. And I have the quote right here where you mentioned that you like working with wood and stone because you feel there is a sense of giving back.
Right.
And your exact words were, it leaves a lasting yet beautiful mark on nature.
Mm-hmm.
Can you elaborate on that?
Well, through life, we're always taking away from everything, or from the world, the environment. So when you do carve into a piece of wood or a piece of stone, to me, it's like you're giving back to nature. You're thanking nature for everything we've taken from it a bit. And it's a nice switch to give back. Like the trees in Cottonwood Island Park, they're a living being. They breathe and they rot, they die, they're born. So they have energy in them. So when you carve something into them that people appreciate, people as they're walking through are shedding their energy towards the trees. They're looking at them, feeling good. To me, there's an energy bouncing back and forth between the trees and the people, and it's very positive. That's what makes that park, I think, so unique. It's like an enchanted forest. It's living, it's breathing, it's got life.
Yeah, and there is so much power in art and so much power in nature. And when you get to combine those two, it's pretty amazing.
It's pretty powerful.
Like, I look at nature, and even if you're going for a nice walk through Cottonwood Island, or if you're heading out east to the ancient forest, or maybe taking on a larger hike around the vicinity like Viking Ridge or Sugar Bowl or Fang Mountain, you could have the most stressful week or the most stressful month or the most stressful year. Mm-hmm. And as soon as you enter nature and start moving your body and going through it, all of that, it's almost like it just dissipates off the back of your shoulders, and you become lost in the beauty that surrounds and is found within Prince George. And you get to spend, as an artist, so much time sculpting in the middle of nature, where it's not just a quick half-hour job and you're done. You're spending multiple hours there.
Yeah, it's very rewarding, and you're absolutely right. We weren't made to be indoors all the time. We've got to be out in bringing in the energy of the outdoors and nature itself. Yeah.
Bringing in the energy of nature and the outdoors. I just like listening to that line. And, with that said, Elmer, I really want to thank you for being a guest on Crazy Damn Canadians. And just one more time for the viewers and listeners, how can people follow you online and see your work?
I'm on Facebook. I have 2 Facebook pages. One's Elmer Gunderson. That's just where I put my crazy lifestyle. The other one's Elmer Gunderson Artist, and that's where I post a lot of my art, what's going on. And then Instagram, which is a great medium for if you want to see stuff I'm really pumping out. I'll do a lot more pictures on Instagram. But those are two of the basic sites that you'll find a lot of my work.
Perfect. All right. You heard it. Follow Elmer online. And once again, thank you for being a guest on Crazy Damn Canadians podcast. It's been a pleasure.
I'm glad to be a crazy damn Canadian.